Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherie Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sherie.
Today we're excited. We're talking about gaslighting.
Yes.
This is a big one.
Big topic, big buzzword.
And honestly, a little surprising perhaps that we haven't already addressed this directly in this podcast. We're on episode...
We have so many things we want to talk about, though.
It is true. And this is definitely, we've said this before, and this is especially true of this topic. This will be multiple episodes to cover the information without the episodes being too long. We want to do better with not having longer episodes, as you might have noticed by now. So this easily is two-part, possibly more. We'll see, but most important is that we cover the information thoroughly, like we want to.
Yeah. And gaslighting, I think, is misunderstood sometimes, or we hear the word, but we don't totally know what it means. A lot of people say, oh, gaslighting, it's crazy making. That's a term that we hear a lot, which in a sense it does kind of make you feel like you're crazy. But there's a kind of a loose way to define it would be to say that it makes someone question their own reality, right?
Right.
And
understanding it better is going to be one of our goals here because it's a buzzword today.
What's the movie that it comes from? I just spaced on what it comes from.
Gaslight.
Oh, it is Gaslight.
It comes from a movie, I believe. It was a play originally in like the 1930s that they made into a movie called Gaslight. And it comes from, 1930s. So as I understand it, the husband would go up in the attic and do things, but he needed a light. And when he used the light in the attic, it would affect the gas in the rest of the house, back when everything was gas lamps. And so the wife would see the lights flicker and think, what are you doing? And he would deny it, and he would say, it's your imagination. And so gaslighting, that's how it became a phrase, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't quote me on all this. I did not research this before. This is just what I've heard. But yeah, it's a good question, why that phrase? But when you hear the story, it's like, okay, she was seeing signs of something was going on. But he, of course, was denying all of it.
Was denying it, telling her she was the one that was crazy, that didn't understand, that was not living in reality of what was actually happening.
Which is the biggest thing here, is that reality piece, making someone question their reality. Mm-hmm. And it's important to note that, I think, as we start into gaslighting and what it is, first of all, when we're talking about the ways you gaslight, there are unintentional gaslighting, or there is unintentional gaslighting, and there is intentional gaslighting. Most of the time when we're talking about gaslighting in a negative sense, we're talking about the intentional, malicious form.
Right.
Not the unintentional, because the unintentional is actually quite common.
Yes.
The intentional or malicious form is emotional abuse.
Yeah.
It is. But the unintentional is not. It's completely different. And so let's talk about the difference.
So when we're talking about what gaslighting is, another way to describe it even is to say it's when someone is putting forth this false narrative, like there's something that isn't actually true, or this false narrative that's leading someone else, or even a group of people, right, to doubt their own perceptions of what's going on, to doubt their own understanding of what's going on in reality, and then they become disoriented, distressed. That's where that crazy making is coming in. And when they're intentionally doing that, then that is that form of emotional abuse.
Right. It's easy to conceptualize it in a context of addiction and how the addict is trying to keep information from the spouse or partner to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And so if you think of it as a protective measure or a defense mechanism, it makes a lot more sense. I mean, sometimes, let's say you go on YouTube and say, I want to learn more about gaslighting. I'm going to watch videos or whatever.
Right.
What you'll often find is everybody who gaslights intentionally
Yes.
is a psychopath or a narcissist or just this terrible person. And if you listen to this, you might think, oh no, I know my spouse is doing this, so
Yeah.
I can't even be with them. I don't know them at all.
Right. And people will say, get away from it's toxic, get away
Yes.
from them, just leave, like get out of the situation. And that's not always the case.
Right.
There's so much that is either unintentional or intentional in the way that they're trying to protect themselves. And that's not to say that it's okay.
Right.
We're not saying, oh, free pass, you can, manipulate and emotionally abuse someone else if you're just desperately trying to protect something
Right.
about you, right? But it helps to kind of understand that this is a process of recovery, and it's a process of bringing unconscious things, right? I think you can intentionally be doing it subconsciously, partially
Right.
as well, right?
Right, and
You
we're
don't
gonna talk about that.
understand
Yep.
why you're doing it. You don't realize the implications or how it's actually affecting the other person, if that makes sense.
Right.
So the intention in recovery is really to bring this to light. It says, okay, look, here's this issue. It's a problem. It is actually emotionally abusive, and let's talk about it. Let's bring it to the surface, spell out the patterns of how it's happening so that you can then start having a conversation about it as a couple and say, hey, look, this is kind of what this feels like is going on, or here are the patterns and the steps.
Right.
So it allows the person who's being gaslit to begin to bring that up and be able to gain some clarity around it, and allows the person who is gaslighting to recognize what they're actually doing. Like, this
Right.
is a thing.
And in a non-defensive, I mean, obviously they can become defensive.
Right.
But when it's, hey, I understand why you're doing this, it makes sense that you're protecting this information, or you're protecting those parts of you that you're afraid will ruin your life. That
Right.
nobody will love you, nobody will ever want to be with you, you're just a failure, you're bad, you're broken. It starts to make sense. And boundaries, we're going to get into that and how to address
Right.
gaslighting, but very helpful to know in the beginning that there's a difference between I'm intentionally just trying to hurt you and manipulate you for my own gain and benefit, and I'm terrified of everybody discovering things about me that I've kept hidden my whole life, really. So understanding is key in this process.
Yes, it's really huge. And ultimately, if they're unable to shift, right, then
Or unwilling. Yeah.
and unwilling to shift, then that's information for you to make decisions. So this isn't like okay, we're going to talk about this, and now you have to throw yourself in this situation and continue to get abused in order to survive.
Right.
In order to try to save, really survival of the marriage, right? That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. And we will talk about boundaries around that. But often we find that we have this sort of this culture of toxicity, right?
Yeah.
Where we talk about that, and it's like, oh, if anything is ever not going your way, or if someone isn't treating you well or whatever, they're toxic, you just get out. You get out, you get out, you get out. And that's going to destroy all relationships, right? Because there's never a point at which someone is going to be perfectly understanding and all of those things around you all of the time.
And it almost sometimes reaches a point of any disagreement whatsoever.
Right.
is some sign of dysfunction or mental illness, when no, it's okay for two people to just not see something the same.
Yes.
And without using, current buzzwords of you're toxic or you're gaslighting me because you won't agree or you have a different opinion.
Right.
So we have to be careful with this stuff.
It's very tricky. It's very tricky to determine because there's this balance of being willing to work with people and try to help the relationship progress and help both sides to see points that they are not being as healthy, or their quality of life is diminishing, to use David's phrase, and working together on how to improve the relationship, right? But also you don't want to be on one end or the either end or the other end where you're getting completely abused, or you're not holding space for someone else to learn and grow and understand, oh, you're doing this thing called gaslighting and it is hurting me. So I love that David is saying understanding, because really the big phrase I tell my clients all the time is when you really understand someone, they make sense.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that it gives them permission to mistreat you.
Right.
But when you understand someone and they make sense, you have some empathy and understanding for what's going on for them. And you can give them a little more space to grow and progress and change.
Yes. And it's okay that they're less effective. So we've talked before about being honest, open, and willing. If they're honest, open, and willing, you can figure this out. Yes. And understanding them, like Sherie says, is not giving them permission to continue in less effective patterns and habits and behaviors or attitudes. It's not. But you're recognizing why they do what they do, where they're coming from, and having understanding and hopefully empathy and appreciation for whatever challenges brought them to this point is going to make a difference.
Yeah, and understanding that growth and change takes some time.
Yeah.
But if they have that honest, open, and willing space, then it can work. It can work.
Right.
And you might even notice that initially they do get a little defensive or frustrated or whatever.
And they will, even because they don't know.
Yes.
They don't see it yet.
They don't know and they don't see it yet. So again, those first initial forays into this new topic, they may be met with some resistance.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It doesn't mean, okay, now we know they're toxic and whatever, because they're not being honest and open and willing. But allowing a little bit of time, a little bit of space while doing the things necessary to keep you safe with your boundaries, right? That's giving the process time. It's giving understanding, awareness. When they say when you're changing habits, there's a process of time where at first you have to recognize that it's even a thing, and then you have to start to understand, and then you're recognizing it after the fact, and then you start to recognize in the middle of it that you're doing it. So there's this process here, but it doesn't mean that you don't keep yourself emotionally safe in that process.
Right.
We're just hopefully opening some space for change, for recognition, for understanding on both of your parts with this.
Yep.
And that's a huge introduction because it's so critical.
It's complicated.
And it's such a tricky line to toe, a balance to find.
Right. But we're not trying to overcomplicate it. So one thing to identify and clarify before we talk about the two types of gaslighting, which are unintentional and intentional, is this concept of some things may appear to be gaslighting when they're not. They're actually positive. And this can be a little tricky to tease out, but let's talk about that.
Right.
So often, for example, in our office as therapists.
Right. We do this all day, every day.
All day, every day. One of my favorite quotes, and you've already heard this many times in the podcast, is mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs. Right. In other words, we're being paid as therapists to help people back to reality. If they come into our office and they're thinking things that just are not accurate or real, our job is to gently and with understanding try to help them to see a different perspective, really to help them to see reality, because their perspective is not reality. And we all do this, by the way. This isn't like there are the people like us therapists who are fixed and never do this, and everybody else.
No, we're all working on it. Yes.
We're all working on it. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because in a sense we are still trying to help someone to reality, to a different perspective than what they have, but this is a positive
something
thing.
That's not serving them well.
Right.
Again, that happens all the time in our office where someone's coming to us, they're struggling with something, and we're assessing, we're being supportive, we're gathering a lot of information, and then through that process of gathering information, being supportive, assessing what's going on, seeing where they're coming from, where those stuck spaces are, and, then addressing a shift that could help them reframe how they're seeing things, or shift how they're doing things in a way that's going to help them into a better space, right? Into this better reality, what's actually going on, right? So you see this a ton with thinking errors. You see it, with, for example, like all or nothing thinking when someone gets a bad grade on a test, right? So you can start seeing yourself as a parent in some of these scenarios. So, your child gets a bad grade on a test and they come home and they're like, it's worthless. I'm a horrible person. I'm a terrible.
I'm never going to get ahead.
Yes. I'm terrible at math, right? Like I have a very cute child that does that a lot, right? I got a bad grade at math. I'm terrible at math. Honey, you're 2 grades ahead in math. You are actually accelerated in math. This concept was just a tricky concept for you to understand. You're definitely not bad at math if you're 2 grades ahead of everyone else. Right?
So inviting them to challenge their own perspective and try to come back to reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We do that. We do that a lot in therapy, but we do that a lot as parents. We do that a ton. If you have really good friends, they hopefully are challenging your perspective. Right? On things. You want people that are going to say, well, hey, have you considered this? Have you thought about this? Right? We do that a lot. We do that with friends. We do that with students, people that, in the workplace. We're going to do that a lot. And here's what that looks like. Here's how that is different than gaslighting.
Right.
That person is being supportive of you. They are validating you and hearing you and seeing you. They're looking at the perspective you're coming from. And they're assessing that based against other things that are going on, right? For example, in that example that I just gave, other students, right? Other perspectives. And they're looking at their own perspective and saying, is this potentially going to add something to their life? Is that going to bring a measure of maybe peace or serenity to their lives, or is it going to help them progress and grow as a person? I think is probably one of the biggest ones, right?
Yeah, and you can tell it feels differently. It feels loving. It feels positive. It feels like light and truth and clarity. And, we talk about there's really only 2 great emotions. There's love and fear. And you begin to really tell the difference when you pay attention. Am I doing this out of fear, or am I doing this out of love? Is this person coming from a place of love, or are they coming from a different place? And it will feel differently.
Right. And see how that feels, right? Versus if I were to approach my child who's saying this and say, oh my gosh, it's fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
You're way ahead. You're getting a 4.0. You're fine.
It's just silly you're even thinking this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's fine. Like, calm down. What is going on? Like, it's dismissive of where that person is.
Right.
It becomes about you, right? I often say the biggest eye-opener for me as a parent was the moment that I realized that the times that I got upset or frustrated or all of those things, almost always it was because I was making it about me, right? I was coming back around like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with it, or this is a problem for me, that they made a mess, or that they're upset and I'm tired and, don't want to have to deal with it, right? So have they made it about, has that person, whether it's you or someone else that's trying to help you see reality, is it about them?
Yeah.
Is it dismissive? Is it ignoring where you're coming from and why that might be hard for you at this time?
Right.
Right? Are they being really supportive of where you are? Are they judging you? Are they helping you to get, what you need? Are they helping you to progress, right? And so that's where this difference is. It feels really different. And this is a good spot to challenge ourselves and how we're responding to the people around us.
Yeah.
Are we being dismissive? Are we shooting them down in an effort to, try to, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this is even a problem for you, right? That can end up being fairly damaging to someone.
Right.
And we might mean it with some good intention, like, oh, I hope that it's not that big of a deal. But if we're coming at it from that space of dismissiveness, right, and not wanting to deal with it and all of that, that's going to end up being hurtful and damaging to the other person.
Right.
Right. So it's something to be aware of when you're seeking to help other people question their reality or challenge what's going on and offering that different perspective. How are you doing it? Are you doing it in a way that could come across as being gaslighting, whether it's unintentional or not, right? Addressing where you are. So it's really, really key. And we haven't even started talking about what gaslighting really is and looks like, because you have to understand these nuances in order to really be able to determine, is someone helping me, trying to be supportive of me and help me move forward? Or am I trying to help someone move forward? Or am I doing this in a way that's hurtful, where I'm unintentionally gaslighting? I'm trying to help them move forward, but there's this part of me that's not really invested and is just being very dismissive.
Right.
Or wants to, protect something about me, like I'm exhausted, so I don't want to deal with you right now. Right? And so there's these three different things. There's this actually working to help someone challenge reality and move into a space that's going to be more useful. And it's this loving process. And then there's this unintentional gaslighting where it's fine, just get over it, whatever. And then there's intentional gaslighting where we're being deliberately manipulative and abusive to try to protect ourselves, to try to get something out of it and have someone else be or do what we want them to be.
Right. And we'll talk about this in a coming episode, how it is deliberate and there's intentional and unintentional. Both are gaslighting. We'll talk about the difference and see how much that matters, what that difference is.
Yes, it makes all the difference, I think. So as we're pulling this apart, hopefully you can kind of stick with us through that and see critically why these differences are important. Because you will see there are going to be times when you can challenge yourself and say, ooh, I might be unintentionally gaslighting someone here because I don't want to deal, or I want to protect something, or whatever the case may be. I can approach them in a much more loving way to help them with their growth process. But also, you can look at whether someone is intentionally or unintentionally gaslighting you or helping you move through something and see something in a different light. And you have to understand exactly what those are in order to be able to feel the difference and see the difference And those are critical distinctions.
Yep, well said. So stick around. Next episode, we are going to continue on this topic and get a little deeper into gaslighting itself. Thanks for joining us.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.